The Forgotten Wharf. Day 6 started before dawn, in darkness so complete it felt like they were sailing through ink. "We approach in the dark," Whale explained in whispers. "The shoals and rocks around the Forgotten Wharf, you can't see them even in daylight. You have to feel them, sense them, navigate by instinct and experience and luck." "You've done this before," Ego said. "You know the way." "Yes, years ago." Whale's face was invisible in the darkness, just a voice from shadow. "The approach is treacherous. The currents shift. The rocks aren't marked because marking them defeats the purpose. You feel your way through or you die." "Encouraging," Bones said, though he'd stopped drinking an hour ago. For this, he needed to be sharp. They all did. They crept forward at a pace that made their previous days seem frantic. The sloop moved through water black as oil, guided by Whale's hands on the tiller and his whispered prayers to saints who might not be listening. "There," he breathed, pointing at something invisible in the darkness. "Feel that? The current's changing. We're entering the shoal field." Ewan couldn't feel anything except terror, but Whale seemed to sense things the rest of them couldn't. Shifts in the water, changes in the sound of waves, warnings written in a language only experienced sailors understood. "Oars," Whale ordered. "Slow. Careful. When I say stop, you stop immediately." The two deckhands and Bones took positions on the oars. Everyone else stayed low and tried not to breathe too loudly. The dogs sensed the tension and went absolutely still. Even the bitch abandoned her anxiety about the boat. They rowed forward. 10 feet. 20. Stopped when Whale hissed. Through the darkness, barely visible, a rock broke the surface. They'd been heading straight for it. Whale adjusted course. They rowed again. Stopped. Adjusted. Rowed. It went on for hours. The sky began to lighten. Grey bleeding into black, shapes emerging from darkness. And with the light came visibility of what they were navigating through. Rocks. Everywhere. Breaking the surface like dragon's teeth, hidden just below, lurking in formations that seemed designed to destroy boats. The water between them was narrow and winding. A maze that would need perfect navigation even in good light. In the pre-dawn gloom, it was a death trap. "How did smugglers ever use this?" Damien whispered. "They lost boats regularly," Whale said, "but the ones who made it through, they could move cargo without the watch knowing. Worth the risk for the reward." They crept forward. A scraping sound made everyone freeze. The hull touching stone, a kiss of wood on rock that could have been catastrophic, but was just a warning. "Left," Whale ordered. "Easy, just a touch." They adjusted, moved forward. The channel widened slightly, and for a moment it seemed like the worst was behind them. Then the current hit. It came from nowhere, or from everywhere, a surge that grabbed the sloop and tried to drive them into the rocks. Whale fought the tiller, muscles straining, the rowers pulled against water that suddenly wanted to kill them. "Hold!" Whale shouted. "Hold or we're dead!" They held, barely. The boat shuddered and groaned, but stayed course. The current released them as suddenly as it had grabbed them, leaving them in calmer water beyond. Everyone was breathing hard, sweating despite the morning chill. Sage whined, the first sound he'd made in hours. "Almost through," Whale gasped. "The wharf should be. There it is." The Forgotten Wharf emerged from morning mist like a ghost. It was old, ancient, built from stone and timber that had been weathering for longer than any of them had been alive. Parts of it had collapsed into the sea. Other parts leaned at angles that suggested imminent failure. But enough remained: a dock, pilings, stone stairs cut into the cliff face, leading up and away. In the distance, they could make the shapes of a handful of squat buildings. The wharf had an atmosphere of abandonment and something darker, something that made the hair on the back of the neck stand up. This was a place where bad things had happened, where people had died, where the very stones remembered violence and loss. "Friendly," Ego muttered, staring at the ruins. "It's not meant to be friendly," Whale said. "It's meant to be forgotten." But they couldn't approach yet. Not without a pilot. "We need someone who knows the final approach," Whale explained quietly. "The last 1,000 yards are the worst. Hidden rocks, shifting channels, can't risk it without a guide." "How do we call them?" Bones asked. Whale produced a signal lantern from a locker. old brass, dented and worn. With this, if they see it, if they recognize it, if they decide to come. That's a lot of ifs, George observed. That's the forgotten wharf, Whale said. He raised the lantern and began signaling. Short flashes and long ones, a pattern that must have meant something to someone who knew the old codes. He repeated it 3 times, then stopped and waited. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The sky continued lightening. Soon it would be full dawn, and the advantage of approaching in darkness would be lost. Maybe they're not, Ego started. A light flashed from near the wharf. Once, twice, a response. Something emerged from the shadows, a small rowboat with a single figure at the oars. It approached slowly, cautiously, like an animal testing whether prey was dangerous. The figure drew alongside and looked up at them with suspicious eyes. An old man, weathered and hard, with the look of someone who'd seen too much violence to ever fully trust again. "That signal's 20 years out of date," he said. His voice was rough as sand. "Where'd you learn it?" "From someone who used this wharf 20 years ago," Whale said. "Before they locked it down. Before the patrols got serious." Things have changed. The pilot studied their sloop, took in the boys, the dogs, the nervous crew. "I'm not taking you in. Too much risk. The watch has been active lately. Questions being asked, bodies found. I don't need that trouble." "We'll pay," Bones offered. "With what? Hope and desperation?" The pilot snorted. "Everyone who comes here has a sad story. Everyone needs passage. Everyone promises gold they don't have." "We have this," Whale said. He produced a small pouch, tossed it down to the rowboat. The pilot caught it, opened it, looked inside. His expression changed. That's more than enough." "That's for passage and silence," Bones said unequivocally, "for bringing us in and then forgetting us." The pilot weighed the pouch in his hand, weighed the risk against the reward, the age-old calculation of people who lived in the spaces between laws. "One run," he said finally. "I guide you through the last approach. You tie up, unload, and disappear. I never saw you. This conversation never happened." "Agreed," Whale said. The pilot began rowing toward the wharf, calling back directions. "Follow exact, no deviation. The rocks here will kill you if you're off by 3 feet. You understand?" They understood. They followed. The pilot led them through a maze that made the earlier approach seem simple. Turns that defied logic. Passages barely wide enough for the sloop's beam. Moments where rocks passed so close they could touch them from the rail. But they made it. The forgotten wharf materialized from the mist, exactly as Whale had described it. Old, collapsed, dangerous. They tied off to pilings that groaned under the sloop's weight, unloaded their gear onto stone slick with algae and age. The dogs scrambled onto solid ground with visible relief. Even the bitch, who'd maintained stoic silence for 6 days, seemed to straighten with joy at standing on something that didn't move. The pilot was already rowing away, vanishing back into the mist and the maze of rocks, disappearing as completely as if he'd never been there. Whale and his 2 deckhands stayed in the sloop, already checking the rigging, preparing for the return journey they'd make together. The stairs lead up to a small town, or it did, Whale said, pointing at stone steps that wound up the cliff face. "From there, someone can point you to the smuggler paths through the hills. Follow them northeast. 2 days' walk, maybe 3, and you'll reach the outer rings of Bannock." "You're not coming?" Ewan asked, though he'd known the answer. "My family's in Mudshaw. My sons are healthy because of you, and I've paid my debt by bringing you here. But I'm not running to Bannock. I'm going home." Whale looked at them each in turn. "You boys watch yourselves. The city is not kind to strangers, not kind to people who come in through the back door. You'll need to be smart, be careful, be willing to do whatever it takes to survive." "We're good at that," George said quietly. "I know. That's why I think you might actually make it." Whale cast off the line. The sloop drifted away from the dock, moving back toward the channel they'd navigated through. "Good luck. You're going to need it." They watched him go. 1 man and 2 deckhands in a small boat, heading back through the killing waters toward a home that had almost lost everything. Heading back to sons who were alive because these 4 boys had been desperate enough to seek a wise woman's help. Then they were gone, swallowed by mist and distance and the maze of rocks that might kill them on the way out. They stood on the forgotten wharf, 4 boys and 5 dogs and a drunk doctor with everything they owned in the packs on their backs. Bones broke the silence. Well, this is dramatic, atmospheric, exactly what I'd expect from a place called the Forgotten Wharf. He looked at the stone stairs leading up. Also exactly the kind of place where terrible things happen to unsuspecting travelers. Anyone else getting "we're all going to die here" feeling? Every moment since we left Blackdown, Ego said. Fair point. Bones took a drink, back to maintaining now that the immediate crisis had passed. Shall we see what horrors await us at the top of those stairs? They climbed. The stairs were treacherous, slick with moisture, crumbling in places built at angles that suggested the people who'd made them hadn't cared about safety or comfort. Just about getting cargo up and down as quickly as possible. At the top of the stairs, they found the remnants of a tiny town on wooden pilings. There is lights in that one, George said, pointing to a building nestled in between 2 others, both with collapsed roofs. The door was open and a pair of drunken women were supporting each other. The boys entered the old building looking for directions. The city was ahead. They would find that smugglers pat through the mountains. And whatever waited in those tiered rings, danger or opportunity, death or new life, they'd face it the only way they knew how, together, just them. 4 boys and their debts, starting the final approach to a city that would either destroy them or forge them into something new. The road to Bannock stretched ahead, winding through hills that held their own secrets and dangers. But at least they were off the water. At least they were still alive. For now, that was enough.